Want to direct Photoshop's AI to the task of perfectly masking hair? And by AI, I don't mean the object selection tool. I mean something far more radical. All right, so I want you to appreciate right up front that I'm trying to put together the most challenging project conceivable, so that you can appreciate that this technique really does work. And so for starters, we have me as the model, complete with my incredibly horrible hair. I just absolutely baby fine hair. You can see through to my skull. Fortunately, it's covered by flesh. Also, by the way, worth noting is that this is an incredibly complicated, intricate background, which is not normally the way you want to work. Typically, you would work with a plain background or a green screen, something like that, in which case you're going to get better results still. And then finally, I'm going to set this thing against a fairly absurd new background in a form of this kind of painted image that I created in Adobe Firefly. It's not even photographic, in other words. And yet, we're going to end up with this final effect. So not only am I impeccably masked, so my shirt is nicely masked, the collar, the jaw, the ears, and so forth, but I also have this amazing hair. So down to the individual tendrils of hair you can see set against the new background. And if anything, and this should give you an idea of the feature we'll be using, I have more hair than I started with. All right, so let's go back to the original image for a moment. Now, I want you to appreciate that I'm set against a bookcase. These are my books over here on the right-hand side, including from long, long ago, Photoshop 4 for Dummies, which I wrote back in 97, something like that. But what's more important is you can see it through my hair, and you can see these other books as well that have either yellow or orange or red spines. And as a result, no matter how well you create the mask, you're going to end up with some of those books left over. So notice you can actually almost read the word dummies right there. And then we have all this orange and this other stuff going on. And yet we're going to end up with this final result. All right, so let's start things off. I just want to give you a warm up. So before we get to the hair, let's just see how we might go about roughly masking this item. So I'm selected right here in the layers panel. And so I'm just going to select remove background. And that way, that's the same as clicking select subject, by the way, and then turning it into a mask. And as a result, we have this mask, and it's actually pretty great, don't you think? Because what that feature does, both select subject and remove background, what they do is they look for edges. So as opposed to comparing colors to each other, it looks for edge details and tries to mask the foreground from the background. It is a kind of AI, it's a kind of machine learning, but it just happens to be older than some of the stuff that we've seen this last couple of years. And it does a decent job on a shirt, not great, but it does a pretty bad job. You can see right on the collar right here. Notice that's bad. And then the ears are kind of munched. You can see through the top of both of the ears, actually. And then we've got this weird detail right there at the intersection of the ear and the jaw. And it goes on and on. Obviously, the hair just looks ghastly. So what I want to do is have Photoshop automatically reevaluate these edges using what passes for the best of AI inside this particular software, which is Generative Fill. And so what I could do is, I'll start, in fact, by loading this mask as a selection outline. And you do that by Control or Command clicking on its thumbnail here inside the layers thumbnail. So now we have that selection outline. And then what I could do, and this can work, by the way, is choose Select Border if you've got the taskbar up on screen. And what Select Border is going to do, I'll just show you really quick. Let's say I go with a width of 40 pixels, click OK. It's going to select all the way around that initial selection, and that way I could have it reevaluate this area. Problem is a couple of things. First of all, look down here. It's going to select around the bottom of my sleeve and my shirt and so forth. Don't want that. And also, it's going into the shirt and into my face and so forth, which means it's going to make a mess
in particular of my ears. It's really going to do a number on those. And that's not what we want. So think of what we really want out of this. What we want is to grow the selection outward, because generally that's the problem, right? We want to reevaluate from me outward, because if we make a mess, a little bit of a mess of the background, that's going to be less noticeable than if we make a mess of my ears, for example. So I'll load that selection outline again by Control or Command clicking on it. Then I'll click on this little brush icon once again, and this time I'll choose Expand Selection. So we're moving the selection out, and this is half the value I just applied a moment ago for select border. I'm going with 20 instead of 40. So I'll click OK, and notice it moves it out 20 pixels. Now let's deselect the actual mask from that by, instead of pressing the Control key, you want to press Control and Alt. Notice we get a little minus sign next to that pointing finger cursor, and that would be, so that's Control Alt click here on the PC, that's Command Option click on the Mac, and that way the border is entirely outside of me. Now, as soon as we run Generative Fill, what Photoshop is going to do is reevaluate that selection. For better or for worse, this is what it does. And it fudges it a little bit inward as well as a little bit outward, which is going to work for us just fine. So I'll click Generative Fill, and then I'll click Generate. I'm not going to enter a prompt, in other words. And basically, within 30 seconds, as long as you have a live internet connection, so Photoshop can talk to Firefly, it's going to generate a new result inside of that selection outline. Now, is it going to be any good? Now, some of you are going to be like, well, the problem with this, Deke, is it looks like dog chow. It looks terrible. I mean, look at every single one of these variations that I can see here inside the Properties panel. They all look tragic. And that's true. They do. However, what they do look, I want in its favor, I want you to see here that it's a plausible edge. It's not a good edge, and it's done terrible things to my ears still, and it's kind of munched up my collar, although it did kind of fix the edge there. So in other words, it's not a bad mask anymore. It's a good-looking mask if all we cared about was the mask. The problem is it's generating some iffy details around my head, especially in the hair, but not limited to that. The ears look terrible. You know, you got the idea. But that is an option. And so you can experiment with that. And, you know, and if you have a lot of patience and it's not costing anything yet, you can click the Generate button in order to regenerate the information inside that selection outline and see what it is you come up with. And one might hope that it's better. It might not be, but I will get 3 new variations. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. But, you know, actually, I got to say, all things considered, I think I like the first one the best. But I don't love it. And so I just want to make it clear that is one way to work, but it gets so much better. And the way things get so much better is to start with a better mask. So I'm going to get rid of this Generative Fill layer I just created, and I'll click on that mask thumbnail and I'll press the backspace key, delete key on the Mac to get rid of it so that we can start over again. This time I'm going to load a mask I created in advance by switching to the Channels panel, and notice this guy right here that I'm calling B+ mask. Because I'd give it a B+. It's pretty good except for the hair, as you can see. And so I'm going to load that alpha channel as a selection outline by pressing the Control key, Command key on the Mac, and clicking on it. So obviously that's the way you always load masks as selection outlines in Photoshop. Now I'll switch back to the RGB image, switch back over to the Layers panel, and then drop down to the Add Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the panel and click on it. And we have this very nicely constructed mask right here. Now wait,
You might be thinking, Deke, you are such a cheater. You started with the mask nearly complete. What a cheater you are. Well, I'm happy to show you exactly how I did it at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DekeNow. And now, back to the better hair mask in progress.
now the first thing I need to do is, this is an old school technique. We need to get rid of these bad colors in the hair, these colors from the books in the background. And then notice I also have a little bit of discoloration. This is an optical thing. My ear is fine, but over on the, what would that be? The right edge of the right ear. we're having an issue that we need to resolve. And this is just a matter of painting in some new colors. And so you want to do that on an independent layer. So create a new layer, and I'll just go ahead and call this hair and ear, because, I've got that ear that I need to, to deal with. And now you want to grab the brush tool, because we'll be a brushing. And of course, you can get that by pressing the B key. Now I'm going to increase the size of my brush a little bit. Right click, make sure your hardness is cranked down to 0%. That's what you want. And then you can get to the eyedropper while the brush is active by pressing and holding the Alt key. Notice that right there. And then just go ahead and click in order to lift a natural color in the hair. And to see what that looks like, I'm just going to click on the foreground color in the color panel. Could be at the bottom of the toolbox, of course. And these are the values I really came up with, because I played around. I came up with a hue value of 10, and I changed the saturation value to 33. And then a brightness value of 50% is going to work great. Doesn't matter what you're going for. Brightness 50 just helps create a baseline. So all we're concerned about is hue, color, saturation, how vivid the color is, and then click OK. And now we just want to kind of paint all over the place, as you're seeing me do right here. Now, not all over the place. You don't want to paint too much into the skull. I'll show you why here. I'll paint into the skull, and you'll see that it makes it kind of dead. But right now, you may be looking at this effect and saying, I don't buy it, Deke. That looks like you used Photoshop. And that's because of a couple of things. First of all, I need to apply a blend mode. So I'll change it from normal to this guy down here, color. So we end up changing the color of the hair and nothing more. So this is before and this is after. And I think you can already see the problem with coloring the scalp, the hair color. That's a problem. And then the other thing is you want to clip it inside of the hair, inside my head, so inside the mask specifically, so it's not affecting the background. And you do that by pressing the Alt key, Option key on the Mac, and clicking this horizontal line between the hair and ear layer and me. And that clips it quite effectively. Now, we do not want my skull to be handled in this particular way. It looks like, it looks like dead flesh. That's no good. And so what we're going to do is, if you'll join me, is switch to the eraser tool. And now I'll right click, and I've got a hardness value of 50% for the eraser, just so you know. And that by default, I believe it's hard. I think it's 100% hard. And we don't want that much hardness. And so I'll just paint that away so that we get my flesh tones back over here. And then if you want to bring back some hair, you would switch to the brush tool. I'll just press the B key and just kind of click in a few spots here in order to bring back the mousy colored hair, the beautiful hair color that I have. Now, for the ear, you would do the same thing. You would press the Alt key, Option key on the Mac to get the eyedropper on the fly, and click in some very saturated part of my ear, like so. And now I'm going to click on that foreground color again so that I can tweak it. And what I'm going to do is take the hue value up to 5 degrees. So before we had it at 10 degrees, which is 0 degrees is red, by the way. 30 is going to be orange. And so we're pretty close to red here. We were a little closer to orange before. And now I'll take the saturation value. Actually, this is pretty good. 60% is good. And then I'll take the brightness value back down to 50%. Just a good baseline for this kind of thing. When you're applying color as a blend mode, in other words. And then I'll reduce the size of my brush. I'm doing that by pressing the left bracket key, and I'll just paint along my ear. And because, even into this section here, and because I've already clipped this layer inside me, the me layer, I am just painting inside my ear, and doesn't that look beautiful? All right, now for the magic. That was not possible more than a year ago. This is the kind of new stuff. And what you do is you want to draw a selection outline with the lasso tool. I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, I switched to the lasso just by pressing the L key. And now what I want to do, I don't like my hair looking particularly combed, because no comb is going to help it, nor will it work. Actually, my hair is just going to do what it does. But so I'm going to kind of draw this jagged kind of little selection outline. I'm just wiggling as I paint along here. And I want my hair to go out a little bit, is why I'm being kind of generous. And then I'm just going to cut through over the ears like so. And I'll explain why that is in a moment. Now, if you want to add even more, you just shift drag, but keep it wiggly. If you want hair if you want smooth hair, do a smooth job. In other words, Photoshop is going to follow whatever selection outline you create. And so if you want nice, smooth, coiffed hair, then draw a nice, smooth selection outline. However, I want it to be jagged and ragged, like I just woke up or something. And so I will, I believe they have a name for that actually. And so I'll just go ahead and drag around. I mean, bed hair and head, whatever. Anyway, so I'm done, right? But the problem is if I do it now, if I apply generative fill now, this is what I'm going to do. Then I'm going to replace my eyes. And they're so lovely. I don't want to do that. And so what I'm going to do now is press the Alt or Option key so I get a minus sign next to my cursor. And I'm going to drag in pretty close to the edge of my hair, of the stuff I want to keep, that is, and that I want to use as a model. But this part's a little difficult to figure out because that's the word dummies right there, right? From the background and from that book. And so I might want to keep that in the selection, but I want to keep it pretty tight to the edge. And then it's just a matter of clicking Generative Fill. Now, this is a poor design decision on Adobe's part, that when you're working with a clipped layer, Generative Fill is dimmed. There's really no reason for that to be the case. And there's other funky layers that it does this with. So just create a new layer. I'll just click on this little plus sign at the bottom of the layers panel. It doesn't matter. It's called layer 1. We're going to get rid of it. It's just there so that Generative Fill will pop up on screen. And then I'm going to call this, let's say, random, messy, fine. Of course, I tried baby fine, but fine works better. Mousy brown hair. Just, add all the gross adjectives possible followed by the word hair, and then click generate. And what it's going to do is it's going to try to fill in this selection with hair. So in this case, it's good to give it some guidance because otherwise it wouldn't know what to do if you didn't enter a prompt. And whoa, is that a nice hairdo? And then what you do is you click through these guys to see which one you like the best. Now, I don't love any of these, frankly. Do you? I don't know. My hair never has done this ever in its entire existence. So let's just click generate again. Let's see what that does, because the other thing we're going to have to do is draw a new selection outline. That's really it, because the prompt is great. What I created as a prompt is pretty wonderful and works really well for this. But that would be, that'd be some aspirational hair. That is ridiculous. Also, by the way, if you don't like some hair like this, click the trash can, this little trash can in the thumbnail to get rid of it. There's no sense in keeping things you don't want, that you don't think you'll use in a million years. And so this guy right here, I will not use. And this guy, I will not use. Will I? Let's see. How about this guy? Maybe I got rid of the wrong one, but that's okay. These are actually both kind of a little bit tragic. So again, what I could do at this point is load that selection outline up, get rid of that layer. And so if I think the selection is the problem, then I could do some more work on it. Like I could alt drag in order to subtract this area that has the book. Technically the book's in this area, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not really going to create too much of a problem. Make sure that I'm going to make sure for my hair that I keep things nice and jagged. And I don't want this much hair maybe over on this side, so I'm going to clip it in. I definitely don't want to create any more hair than I already have in my ears. And so let's try this out. Why don't we? Actually, well, let's make some more refinements, but this is what you would do. By the way, it's just keep refining the selection and then cross your fingers, right? Click Generative Fill, enter again, random. I definitely need messy. That's got to be in there. Fine. Mousy brown. I don't know if I need mousy or brown, actually. Hair. I do need hair, so it tries to go with that. I could, let's see. No, let's not push things. You can play with your prompt all by yourself. All right, so that makes me look like a complete dork, but I've got these other variations as well. This is too much. This is too ridiculous, and this, I think, is bordering on just right. And to give you a sense for what we've done, this is without that layer of generative fill here, which still has that book in it, and also it just looks bad. It's a terrible, tragic mask. And this is how things look now. And so it's not just for those of you who want to generate more hair, as I might in my case, but also for those of you who just want to take good hair and make it look great against a different background.
So what do you think? Comment below. Not to mention like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. To learn how I expertly mask myself out of that busy background, join me at patreon.com/DeekNow. And then go to Deek.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deek Now.